You're watching Things Your Brain Wants You to Know, a mental health video blog by Wellness for Humanity. I'm Kayleen Khan, and today we're talking about women's hormones and mental health with special guest, licensed marriage and family therapist Annalisa Barrett, who specializes in perinatal and perimenopausal care, including helping women thrive through their cycles and hormonal changes. Thank you for joining us.
I'm so excited to be able to pass along all of your knowledge and your guidance to our clients. I just want to dive right in and give you a chance to share a bit about your background, who you are, and what brought you to having this specialty.
Yes, sounds good. And thank you, Kayleen, for having me and for doing this. Background is I always start with this because it feels like the most important part of my identity, but I'm a mother of two. Age 13 and almost 15. So, you just leave a bowl of water out for them and they're good to go pretty much. So I'm well past any, like the postpartum stage, but I used to teach prenatal yoga. And from there, I went on a postpartum doula. And then from there, I became a licensed therapist. And, where I'm at now today as a licensed therapist, personally, I'm going through the journey of perimenopause. So all of those things combined, my own postpartum experience, taking women through their postpartum experience, and now treating women through all those stages has kind of to this space of sort of, I guess, an expert in women's, mental health. And one of the things that drew me to it really was like what I probably noticed during my postpartum journey was that our culture, meaning like the US, America, we don't have much of a consideration for women in their postpartum experience or for new mothers. And they're needing emotionally and physically, like, I'm sure as you're aware, like those post, you got your first doctor visit 6 weeks post, right? Like, whereas babies coming in weekly. So they're checking on baby, making, obviously like they're vulnerable. We want to make sure they're okay. But, mom's not even looked in on until she's six weeks post. So there's, and we're an individualistic society. So we don't have the aunties and the grandmas and all of the exchanging of hands. It's pretty much like if mom, if she's even got a maternity leave, she doesn't have to go back to work right away, and her partner to an extent, unless they have to go back to work. So it's limited, right? The help and support is quite limited, I think, if you're living in our society. Sort of in that fourth trimester. I'm not sure if you've heard of that term before, but there's a book and it's called The Fourth Trimester. And that book like really woke me up to, oh, wow, wait, our bodies do go through so much change after, like during, or, while pregnant, during birth, post-birth. Like, how is this so overlooked and ignored and not talked about?
Right.
Like, how? You've been through the biggest transition of your life, and and really like the rhetoric, I think it's changing, but at the time that I had given birth, it was, when are you going to bounce back?
Right.
And we talked a little bit about your experience with that expectation of yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And yeah, I think there's a whole, you're so right, a healthcare view of what's prioritized for women's health. I've read about how just women's health in general has been there's so many things that should be prioritized that are not, and that's just because that's the way healthcare has gone, and it makes sense for men too. And so things are still very like, it's just how we do healthcare. But there's been so much knowledge we've gained over time, so many things that women have noticed over time that we're like, that something actually needs to change. And I've even seen it in the clients who've come to our clinic who are like, I've gone to doctor after doctor after doctor, and it wasn't until I met like a younger woman doctor who like had more recently gone through school that I felt I was really validated, or they asked me questions that I hadn't been asked before. So hopefully that is like a hope too, that, oh, things may be changing in the healthcare field. Like I know it happens slowly, slow changes, but
Yeah.
hopefully
Yeah.
that will be a
Yeah.
thing. Um,
Yeah.
but
Awareness.
right, yeah, yeah. And I'm so glad to hear that you have all of those different roles that you had in the past that brought you now to being a therapist with all of this history and expertise. Um, I am so curious to know what some of the uh, main issues people do come to you for. What are the symptoms they complain about? What are their experiences? Yeah, who comes to see you?
Sure. I will say, like I said, my specialty is with the perinatal community, right? So that kind of starts at birth, and I'm so like happy to see that women are starting to take care of themselves earlier, like, as they're starting their pregnancy journey, saying, you know what, I want to set myself up for success. So maybe I should talk to someone and just make sure that I'm understanding what I'm going through now before I'm really in it. So, I'm a linear thinker, so I'm going to start there, right? So when women come to see me who are expecting, they're struggling with birth fears, competency fears, change of lifestyle concerns, partner contribution, health of the baby, right? So
Yeah.
that's what's on their mind, as they're growing life inside of them and anticipating the next chapter of their life. Women who are postpartum, they're struggling, obviously, like first and foremost, sleep, like sleep nutrition, like that. The, I was mentioning earlier, like one of the first questions I ask is, do you track your cycle? Also, one of the first things I address with male and female clients is, what's your sleep like? Like sleep nutrition, I think, is one of the most important pieces of functionality. So you're just obviously in postpartum dealing with interrupted sleep, then that can lead to anxiety and depression. For women who and parents, I don't want to just gender it, but it's for people who are used to, I don't know, maybe having a more type A lifestyle, like they're really struggling with that lack of structure and routine.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's a struggle with partner contribution, like
Right.
a care gap. And guilt and rage. So that's where the hormones come into play. And again, postpartum rage is a real thing, and it's very much hormonally linked, but all of those other things I explained are linked to it too.
Yeah.
Women are really in it during that time.
Right.
Unrelated to motherhood, right? So the time in between or before or after. I have young women, who haven't begun that journey yet. I've seen. Have you heard of ROCD, relationship OCD? It's kind of like
Oh,
a
yes. Yeah. Yeah.
term, but I see, especially women who have treated for a long time. I can see this kind of cyclical nature of around the time that they're in that luteal phase of their cycle, they are questioning their relationship and
I see.
kind of like finding problems within it,
Yeah.
and it only exists for them during that phase in their cycle. Outside of that phase, everything's just fine. So I've seen that. I think that could be hormonally related.
Yeah.
The self-critical thoughts increase. I see, women coming in like dealing with societal expectations, worthiness. Obviously, social media plays a lot within that. Social media has a lot to do with that. Mistrust of men, I'm working with women on that.
Yeah.
And all of these kind of broad range issues, I do witness get exacerbated when women are in the luteal phase of their cycle. Like those problems seem heavier, deeper, stronger during
I
that phase.
see.
And it's not to say that, it's not to minimize that they're not true or not real.
Right.
I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent, but what I believe about this part, about this like cycle in our life, like as a woman, is it's not meant for us to feel miserable. It's meant for us to like have some information about ourselves. Like it's a time to slow down and take a look at, like I'm feeling a lot right now. What does this mean for me? It's not Not,
Yeah.
if you're really struggling, it's probably because you're fighting against it. It's probably
Right,
because you're
right.
going like, "Ah, I have so much anxiety and I don't want to. What do I do to get rid of it?" Rather than,
Yeah.
what is the information about this right now?
Yeah. Or just like dismissing it and ignoring like, it's because I'm on my period, you know? Like I hear that a lot too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You really like kind of learn to go with your cycles, and like that's where the
Yeah.
tracking comes in, right? Because you look at the calendar and you go, "Oh, I'm kind of due right now. That's why I'm feeling everything so deeply."
Yeah.
Okay, what's the opportunity right now? What
Right.
where down and take a look at what needs some attention.
And so that cyclical pattern of intensity that comes up, I know you're talking about that. It's like, oh yeah, that's a really clear sign that this is hormones. This isn't just about like
Yeah.
you and your partner have to figure out how to coordinate these new things or adjust to this, or oh, you're losing sleep, so you have to, handle this. Are there other tells that you think are important for women to know of like, oh, this may be a hormonal issue and not necessarily a something else issue?
Yes, definitely. And I want to definitely emphasize that it's not either or, right? It's not like, it's not either like a mental health issue or a hormonal issue. I think they're very
Yeah.
synchronistic, right? And the external stressors play a real role in that too. They just get exacerbated when we're depleted. Um, so, to answer your question, one of the obvious tells is like, where am I at in my cycle? Am I in my follicular phase? Am I in my luteal phase? Am I on my cycle, or, am I ovulating? I do something called nervous system mapping with my clients. So that's where you are going to start them in a dysregulated state. So have them think about something that puts them in parasympathetic, something kind of anxiety inducing, the last time they felt like they were in that fight or flight mode. And it's not hard to like get our nervous system into that state, right? Just
Right.
imagining something triggering. And then you ask, okay, what is true for you when you're here? What is true for you? What is true about your relationship? What is true about the world? And then you can even talk them into like a free state. Okay, remember the last time that you were so stuck that you couldn't make a move, and feeling really down and lethargic. And okay, what's true for you? And then I end with, okay, now let's go into regulation and get ourselves to a more grounded space. When's the last time you felt really connected to your partner, and when's the last time you really felt connected to yourself? Okay, what's true for you now?
Yeah.
Right. And every time, what's true in that regulated state is actually the truth, and it's a much kinder story. And so I guess to kind of tie it back into the cycle, if you know what your truth is when you're in a regulated state, then the other truths when you're in a sympathetic or freeze state are what's coming up most likely around your cycle, like around that kind of
I
tender
see.
time. So you can
Yeah.
say, hey, I'm having these thoughts. I know these are the thoughts that I have when I'm off, or
Right.
when I'm dysregulated. I think in one of the questions we were talking, you had asked about like the definition of PMDD, or how we
Right.
see PMDD, right? And so that's
Yeah.
like a severe mood, or like severe physical symptoms, severe mood fluctuations during the premenstrual phase. And if it interferes with your daily functioning, then it's something to take a look at, right? So signs would
Right.
be like recurring conflict with loved ones, increase in critical thinking, self-doubt, questioning, increase in depressive symptoms and self-isolation. So, if that's occurring, at the time, like typically right before you start your period or during, then that could be a sign of a PMDD.
I see.
Also, I just want to caveat too, like it's how you take care of yourself during that time is going to impact all of those things. So we're all going to experience that shift to some degree. But if we're pushing past it, if we're resisting it, if we're ignoring it and not caring for ourselves during that time, then there's going to be more upheaval emotionally.
Yeah. Yeah. And to almost like to rewind when you talked about just those thought experiments of like, focus on where your nervous system is when you're dysregulated, and all these different truths you talked about. I love how you worded it of like, that regulated state, that is your truth, that is you. And I think that adds so much. I mean, I felt this self-compassionate energy that can be brought into that experience of, I know so many people who are at their worst or struggling, and they're looking and comparing themselves to other people and thinking that something's wrong with them, when there are these different versions of ourselves for everybody. But well, yeah, when you look at your own versions of yourselves, it's like there's my regulated state, and there's the times that I'm really struggling, and they're all truths, but I know this is me. So I love that it's like an opportunity to have that self-compassion.
We shift lenses, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
not always see through that clear lens, and that's okay. But just kind of recognizing, oh, I have a bit of a filtered lens on right now.
Exactly.
Okay. So how do I want to deal with that?
Yeah.
And also noting, I also just, for like importance, it's important to note that, if one is having like ideation or, like immobilizing pain, like those are symptoms that need like immediate treatment and attention, that's like beyond the scope of just like going and talking to someone regularly like that. I would seek medical attention if that's for you, especially cyclically.
Yeah, meet that intensity of struggle with the intensity of support.
Yeah.
It's the focusing on what different states that you're in. I commented on. I love that it kind of adds this self-compassionate zone to it. But here and there, I'm also hearing you talk about how there is that strong connection between what your hormones are doing and how your brain is reacting. And that's kind of, our clinic is that's where our specialty lives. It's like, okay, here's what your brain is doing. Here's how it's impacting your mood and your whole nervous system. What it's doing. I know that helps people kind of ground themselves. I'm like, oh, I am wired this way. And I wanted to ask the question with the same goal of like, okay, what can we ground ourselves in terms of like science? Like, what really is the connection between how our hormones are impacting our moods, our sense of like concentration, or or how all those struggles kind of play out internally? What does that really look like?
For sure, right. And so this is where I'll caveat that like I don't have a medical background, but I can share the knowledge that I understand. There's a book called Moody Bitches that provides a lot of information, and it's very accessible. It's by Julie Holland. So a lot of what I know comes from her work too. It's good. Sorry, pardon the language, but that's the title. It's great. I recommend it for all women. But yeah, our bodies are wired for our own primal needs, right? So even if you're in a postpartum rage fit, like that is information. Your body's trying to tell you something.
Yeah.
So, as far as like impact on brain function, obviously it depends on like what stage you're in. Are you going through pregnancy? Are you going through postpartum? Are you, going through perimenopause, menopause, or somewhere in between? Like there's going to be a different landscape. Progesterone, estrogen, cortisol, prolactin, oxytocin, kind of those are the big players, especially in the perinatal realm. I would say as like an overview, I could kind of describe what each of those, how those function. Like oxytocin is the love hormone. That's the bonding hormone. It's not just experienced after birth, it's experienced after lovemaking or, during like connected touch. Prolactin is related to breast milk and breast milk production. Cortisol, that's a big one that we all need to know. I mentioned before, I think sleep is really integral for people. And if you are one who struggles with sleep, it's likely that you have some cortisol imbalances. And so that's the stress hormone. And these people are going to roll their eyes at this, but like I technically feel like we should be in bed by 10, and like 10 to 6 is kind of like ideal sleep cycle. You might notice if you're a late owl that you'll kind of get a wave of tiredness around 10, but if you push past, like up, and that's cortisol kicking in. Babies who struggle to sleep, if you don't catch them during that like tired, like if you don't, while they're rubbing their eyes, if you don't like get them down on time,
Yeah.
they're going to get super tired. That's cortisol kicking in. So
I
cortisol plays,
see.
I don't know how, I'm like, I could geek out on this all day long. Like if you're in perimenopause, cortisol kicks in when your blood sugar gets low. That's why, you were speaking to our culture kind of being a little bit more like patriarchal in terms of how we research and study the body. So intermittent fasting, not the best thing for women, particularly perimenopausal women, because your blood sugar is going to drop, your cortisol is going to go up, and that can actually cause weight gain. So it's counter.
So I should stop my intermittent fasting.
But like there's just little shifts. Maybe that means Julie Holland suggests having a spoonful of peanut butter before you go to bed to regulate the levels, and that can be enough to sustain you until 12 o'clock. So just something so that you're not like dropping so low that your cortisol goes up. Right. Progesterone is responsible for a lot of the mood swings. I don't know. Some women report feeling really calm during pregnancy and like really relaxed, and like especially if they're normally more high strung, that's the increase in progesterone.
Interesting.
With that. And it also has like a brain link to like the shedding of the lining. So women with PCOS have a bit lowered levels of progesterone and higher levels of testosterone, and sometimes that brain uterus connection gets interrupted with that lowered progesterone, so they're not shedding their lining like every month. Maybe it's every 3 months. Very inconsistent. So it's related to that. Lowered estrogen is the cause of like the night sweats, anxiety, depression, and that some of that postpartum rage and that quite a bit postpartum, and in perimenopause as well. We were talking about like when does one feel normal postpartum? It could take up to 2 years for the body to return.
Oh my gosh.
It fully, right? Baseline level. Doesn't mean you're going to be crazy for 2 years, but your body's been through. Your body grew a human. Like, let's give a little credit for that. You made a human with a body.
Right. Huge life event for the body.
Things take time to go back, whatever even that means, because you probably go back to whatever it was before you became a mother, before you were a maiden.
Yeah. And that makes so much sense with how long it takes from beginning of conception to when the baby's out. Like, that's almost a full year of like being in a different body state. So I guess 2 years doesn't really sound like too long of a time when you think about how long it's been in a completely different mode.
100%. And there's I struggle to pronounce this, but you may have heard of it. Like, I think it's called mitochimerism, and that like the baby's DNA mixes with the birth mother's blood.
Oh, I've heard that. Yeah.
So your children's DNA is mixed in with yours like permanently. So there really is no like returning to a pre-birth state. That's not. The last one that I haven't mentioned is testosterone. Women have testosterone too. So that's responsible for like, to some degree, concentration, libido, and energy. So as that goes down, some of those things might decrease as well.
Yeah. I can see how there's such a huge fusion between mental health and hormones. Like,
oh yeah,
they're
like
unbreakable bond here.
Yeah, we talked about the nervous system and the mapping and like fight or flight mode. So that cortisol, that's the primary function when we're in fight or flight. It's like our adrenal glands are on and it's excreting cortisol. So that puts you in a sympathetic state, right? But what happens when you're in a sympathetic state for too long? You go into a parasympathetic state, and that's the collapse state, right? That's
Yeah.
like you and that's usually you're going from high anxiety to depression.
Right.
And that like cortisol is sort of like the instigator of all of that.
Let me see. And since we're talking about like, oh, we're changing our view here of like they're not separate things, they're fused together, they're one. Are there other, uh, how do I want to say it? I guess like mythbuster things you want to share, like misconceptions that people have been tend to carry around that you just want to chalk it out here, right here. Let's get clear on
Yeah,
what the reality is.
definitely. One is most of like the there's especially here in Southern California, and I'm sure you guys see it too in Northern California, like there's a big boom of like health and wellness, like taking, going to the gym, and it's great, it's wonderful, like yes,
Yeah.
let's go take care of our bodies, but please know that most of this research is based on men's bodies, and men's bodies are cyclical, but their cycle is within a 24-hour period. That's why, like, intermittent fasting completely geared toward a male body. Women's bodies are not on a 24-hour cycle. We're on a monthly cycle. Misconception number one is a lot of the stuff in the zeitgeist right now is not for your body. It's for the male 24-hour cycle body. So if, not saying don't do it, but, if you're looking at your cycle, which is more of a 30-day cycle, how can you tailor your healthcare needs to that cycle, and you just it'll make you feel better,
Yeah.
Another thing is mood fluctuations are healthy and informative. I touched on this earlier, but
Yeah.
there's this need to like want to get rid of emotional pain, and there's a place for that, obviously. Like I said, if you're having suicidal ideation, of course address it,
Yeah.
but if you're having some anxiety or some negative thinking, or something's just kind of tugging at you, and you notice that it's increased during that luteal phase, just turn toward it and take a deeper look at what's calling your attention.
Yeah.
What needs to shift, what needs to change. That's that self-compassion piece, being a little more gentle with yourself instead of expecting that you're going to be high functioning all the time.
Right.
Another thing, hormone therapy is talked about a lot. It's a bit controversial. Some people say like wait until your numbers show that you need replacement therapy. Other camps say start it as soon as you're in perimenopause, which could be age 35, right? So I think this is where I'm going a little out of scope. Obviously, like this is something you might want to talk to your doctor about or do more research on. But what I have come to learn in my research is HRT is better to start during perimenopause versus menopause. Like the earlier the better. With certain ones, like when I'm talking about progesterone and estrogen. Estrogen, if you take a synthetic form of estrogen, it will interfere with your natural production. So that's one to maybe wait until later. Progesterone interference with your own hormone.
Okay.
Right. So there's only a benefit to if you're lower in those numbers.
And what would be like, I know you started mentioning about how people could track their hormones. What are your top recommendations on how people can start tracking themselves better?
Yes. So if you want to do it at home, and I have no connection to this. Like this isn't a promotional ad or anything, but I've used this. I don't know what you call it. Resource, I would say. It's called Oova, OOVA. So you can do it as long as you want. I recommend at least 3 months, but you're peeing on a stick every day, and then I think you take a pic. It like shows you lines, and you take a picture with your phone, and then it shows up in the app as far as like, okay, today these are your hormonal numbers.
Yeah.
And if, if you do it at the same time every day, it's going to be more accurate information. And like I said, the longer you do it, if you can stick it out for 3 months, you're going to get more comprehensive information. This, you can get a hormone panel done through getting blood work too, through your doctor. But that's just one snapshot of one day. So I like that this gives like some longitudinal information.
Yeah.
I was saying earlier, right? I recommend getting a hormone panel done like sooner than later. Like, if you haven't started experiencing perimenopausal symptoms yet, go in now, get your panel done so that you have a baseline. And then, if and when you start to experience changes or shifts, your gynecologist or OB has an understanding of like what's normal for you, so that if there's, because everybody's numbers are different, like what looks like low estrogen for one could be one's normal range of estrogen.
Yeah.
There's also something called the Oura Ring, which I think has caught some popularity lately.
Yeah.
That, it's not, it's going by like temperature and heart rate, so it's not as accurate as like urine or blood. But it's on your finger all day, every day, so it's collecting a lot of data, and I think it's really helpful for tracking your cycle. Like mine's at this point, I've had it for about a year, and like it knows right away. It's like you were going to get your period today, and it's usually pretty accurate. And it links up with another app called Natural Cycles app. So if you just want, that's good for like family planning, or if you want to prevent pregnancy too, like it will tell you green days, red days, depending on what your goal is.
Right. That's cool. Technology to be able to track these things. All right.
Okay. And you know what? If you don't want to like invest in these fancy things, like just keep a calendar. Like most of us have calendars on our phones. I put the moment that I get my period, I just put code red in my calendar so I know. And that way, like if I need to go back and look, like all I have to do is search code red and I can see, okay, but this is when my period comes. Like it's roughly every 27 days. Like, you can track it that way too. Or if you're starting to notice that your negative experience is increasing, you can kind of go in your calendar and go, oh, yeah, okay, that's coming up in 5 days. That's what's coming up for me.
Yeah.
I really, really recommend, however, whatever works best for you, keeping track, like knowing about when you're going to expect your period.
Right. Yeah, and it sounds like any tracking can be helpful. Like as long as you're just not in the dark with it and just wondering why these things are coming up, it seems so helpful just to know when your cycles are. And then you had mentioned before, like once you get to know your cycles and know how to take care of yourself, are there specific lifestyle things or helpful things that your clients have noticed to help guide them through their different stages of their cycles?
Definitely. Follicle phase, which is right after your period, right? Follicle phase. Yes. So this is like, I guess it's considered the day one. Day one would be considered when your period starts. That's when you're entering into the follicle phase, and then that 2 weeks afterwards. So that's the time to make social plans. That's the time to be out and about. That's the time to put on your Lululemons and go to the gym. That's the time when you're going to have the most energy. That's the time when you're going to feel the most sociable. You've just your body's just kind of cleansed. You're primed. Ovulation, ideal time for baby making if that's your goal. Ideal time to abstain if it's not. So that, but also if you're really in tune with yourself, you might notice, especially if you're in a long-term marriage, and we're obviously desire is probably waned a little bit. If you're really paying attention to what cycle you're at in your body, you might notice that you're a little more open to it or a little more willing, and your body's a little more primed for it. And it's okay if it's not too, by the way. That might not be the case for you. Some women actually experience like cramping during this phase. They can actually feel the egg transitioning. So it's not always a feel good time, and it's okay if it's not. And then we go into the the luteal phase, which is, everything's going to kind of come down at that point. Hormones are dropping, or they're going up and down, which is even more of a roller coaster. So this would be the time to, from like me, if you're active, like do a little more yoga, less HIIT workouts. It's a time to be a little bit more introspective, right? Like a lot of, I do a lot of like moon circles, and I used to go to new moon circles, and then I realized something wasn't lining up, and I was like, oh, it's because I want to be like more insular during this time. I actually I want to do the journaling and I want to do the feeling, but I want to do it alone. Full moon circles, that's more like, that's tied in with the follicular phase. That would be the time, to go in and do something with a group and be social. During the luteal phase, I'm tying it with the moon, because if you're thinking about a moon cycle, this is when it's waning, right? So you're going inward a little bit. And then obviously menstruation, most of us don't feel great. We don't feel 100%. We don't live in a world where you can take a full week off of work, unfortunately, for that purpose. But do less where you can, and give yourself some room to like nap. I had a client in yesterday who was on day 1 of her period, and she laid on my couch in a fetal position. I could tell just her energy was like super low, and I was like, okay, well, we're not going to do super deep work right now. What do you need? Maybe you just need to feel nurtured right now. And that's what she wanted. Right. So just listening to that and not feeling like bad, because we're so conditioned to be doing all of that.
Right. And push through that pain and not slow down to take care of yourself. I'm so glad your client was able to do that with you. And I do want to give people a chance to know how they can become a client of yours, or reach out to you if they want a consultation or any resources. How can people learn more about you and connect with you?
Thank you. And I appreciate that. I do have a website, annalisabarrett.com. So ANNALISA BARRETT.com. Lots of double letters in that one.
I'll put it in writing on our post here.
And through my website, I believe there's a link to my email. So reaching out via email is probably the best way if you want to set up a consultation. I do offer like a 15-20 minute phone consultation for prospective clients. And and then from there, if there's an alignment, we can talk.